Laura Blumenfeld is a Middle East analyst at Johns Hopkins University in the United States. She joins me from Washington, D.C. Laura, the U.S. government told Israel, we give you 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or we'll cut back military aid. 30 days later, humanitarian groups, including Oxfam and Save the Children, are saying the humanitarian situation is even worse than before. A UN report is saying that people are starving, but the U.S. government says we're not changing anything. The military aid to Israel will continue. Help us understand this.
Well, I think the key point for the United States and what the State Department is saying is that Israel has not violated the law. I do think, however, that this goes to an old saying. A former Israeli prime minister, in fact, once said, never deliver yourself an ultimatum because it boxes you in. And I think the U.S. has boxed themselves in a bit. There was a fierce fight, from what I understand from my sources at the State Department, where some aides and advisors were actually calling for limiting weapons transfers because of this report. And others were saying, look, they've shown improvement. Let's give them some encouragement. We can always take action later. So Israel isn't off the hook, but they haven't quite been reeled in yet, at least not today.
And as you're saying, some U.S. officials are saying, look, Israel is taking some steps in the right direction, but they're not doing enough. Why do you think the U.S. decided to give Israel a pass, at least for now?
Well, they have increased the number of aid trucks that have gone in, and they opened a new border crossing today. So there is some tangible improvement. But I also think there are several things they can do down the road. And they're hoping that, perhaps they won't have to, but maybe they will. One of them is to take action at the UN. And you saw that the U.S. envoy at the UN today said that, Israel is in danger of, they're being overseeing a conditions of famine, and that it's very important that Israel abide by the law. And so they can always, down the road, whether there's a UN Security Council resolution that the United States would either support or not veto, that's one possibility. The other thing is there's a sort of many issues at stake right now. One of them is a wider war. The envoy for Lebanon, Amos Hochstein, said that the United States has a shot to end the war, to clinch that kind of ceasefire deal. So perhaps they don't want to crack down on Israel right now with regard to Gaza because they're close to a ceasefire in Lebanon.
So you're saying some of this decision might be strategic. It might be about keeping the line to Netanyahu's government open. Let's talk, though, about Washington and the politics there, because, as you know, there were elections in the United States. Does Washington's decision to keep up military aid at all have to do with the Democrats losing the election and a new Trump presidency starting in January?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of moving parts right now. Perhaps if VP Harris had won, Biden would have been willing to take sort of some harsher steps in order to lay the groundwork for Harris to have a little bit of a smoother time so she wouldn't have to crack down on Israel. Biden wouldn't have any kind of domestic political considerations since he wouldn't be going into a second term. So I do think with Trump ascendant, it's really complicated. You have Israeli advisors on the phone. Apparently, Netanyahu has spoken to Trump 3 times since he was elected president. And then we have our sitting president, and then we have a former candidate as well. So chaos loves a vacuum, and there's a little bit of vacuum of leadership, or perhaps a 3-headed leader right now.
And let's look ahead then to a Trump presidency. We learned today that Donald Trump wants former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee to be his ambassador to Israel. There are reports too that Senator Marco Rubio is Trump's pick for Secretary of State. What are their stances on Israel and Gaza? And kind of more broadly, what do you think that this means for Trump's vision for the Middle East?
Yeah, well, it's a real win for the hawks versus the kind of homebodies, the isolationists. Huckabee's not only a former governor, he's also a former pastor, a Southern Baptist, and he believes that Jews have a biblical right to the Holy Land and to all of it. So you have a sense of prophecy as policy here with him. He's you wouldn't call it occupation, though. He's pro-annexation. He believes that Jews, they have been living in this territory, which he calls Judea and Samaria, for thousands of years. It goes all the way back to the Bible. And Huckabee's stance on Gaza is really simple. He's a real clarity to it. He's just, Hamas needs to release the hostages and surrender. It's as simple as that. For Rubio as Secretary of State, I think Iran, the supreme leader, is probably uneasy tonight. He's always been an advocate of cracking down, of a real hardcore stance on Iran as well. So I think for those two, those two leaders, they're both very pro-Israel. Biden was also very pro-Israel, but I think that his approach, President Biden and his team, was Israel has the right to defend itself, but how you do this matters. I think for Trump and his team, it's Israel has a right not only to defend itself, but to go on the offense. Although I would say what Trump is saying, when you do this matters. And he's saying, get it done. He wants it done before he's president because he wants to be known as the president of peace.
Right. And Laura, just briefly, Trump has said to Netanyahu he wants to see this war in Gaza end before he takes office. How much influence do you think he has there?
I think he has quite a bit of influence over Netanyahu. I mean, in some ways, they're singing from the same page. They're both echoing Ronald Reagan saying peace through strength. Unfortunately, Netanyahu saw war through weakness on October 7th, and Trump has very little tolerance for weakness. He likes the kind of winning Netanyahu, not the whining Netanyahu. And so I think that, Netanyahu is going to snap to it because he'd like to continue the partnership, which is a very positive one during his last presidency.
Middle East analyst Laura Blumenfeld, thank you.
Thank you.